Imagine a guy, 62 years old, spent 40 years doing everything right. Showed up, worked hard, built something. The week before he retired, his financial advisor sat him down and walked him through the list. Sell the fishing boat. You're spending $5,000 a year on storage and maintenance. That money compounds. Run the math. So he sold it, and the math worked out. Every number on the spreadsheet got a little better. The problem was, that boat was the thing he looked forward to. Every weekend for 22 years, 4:30 in the morning, cup of coffee, headlights on the water. That was his thing. He sold the boat, kept the spreadsheet. 6 months into retirement, his wife told me he didn't know what to do with himself. He'd wake up at 4:30, sit in the kitchen, and have no place to go. I used to be one of those advisors who gave that kind of advice. Sell the liabilities, trim the fat, optimize the balance sheet. I thought I was helping people. What I didn't understand, and what the spreadsheet never tells you, is that some costs aren't waste. Some costs are the reason you get out of bed. You have fewer than 1,000 healthy weeks after age 60. Think about that number for a second. Less than 1,000. That's not a reason to panic, but it is a reason to be very deliberate about what you're cutting and what you're not. Today, we're going through 5 things you actually need to sell, downsize, or let go of before you retire. Some of these are financial decisions. Some are psychological ones. And number 5, I'm going to walk you through what I call the 6% penalty, a transaction trap hiding inside the most common retirement advice out there that can quietly erase decades of equity in a single move. If you've got something sitting in your garage right now, a boat, an RV, a motorcycle, a classic car, and you're on the fence about whether to keep it or sell it, drop keep or sell in the comments. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. Let me tell you about a couple I know. Both worked their whole careers. Solid savers. They had a retirement date circled on the calendar, 63 years old, right on schedule. Then their daughter called. She'd found a house. First home. Perfect neighborhood, good school district. She just needed help with the down payment. $40,000. They had it. And of course they helped. They're good parents. That's what good parents do. But to pull that $40,000, they had to touch their retirement account early. Between the taxes and the 10% early withdrawal penalty, that $40,000 cost them closer to $55,000 out of pocket. And they pushed their retirement date back, not 1 year, 3 years, 3 years, ages 63 to 66. Gone, their daughter got the house. And they gave up what most people consider the best years of early retirement, the window when you're still healthy, still mobile, still have the energy to actually do things, to make it happen. Here's the part that doesn't show up anywhere on the paperwork. If they hadn't helped, their daughter would have been fine. Not immediately, but fine. She had options, FHA loans, assistance programs, a longer savings runway. She had time. They didn't. That's the core of this. Your kids have decades to course correct financially. They can borrow for a home. They can work through a tough year. There is no loan product called a retirement loan. No one hands you back the years you traded away. According to Bankrate, about 51% of American parents say they're actively sacrificing their own retirement, savings, or emergency funds to financially support their adult children. 51%. That's not a rounding error. That's a structural pattern. And the math underneath it is worse than most people realize. If you're pulling $1,000 a month out of your retirement accounts to help an adult child, maybe covering their rent, their car, their phone bill, whatever it is, that's $12,000 a year in direct cash. But that's not what you're actually losing. That $12,000 invested and compounding at a modest 7% annually grows to roughly $48,000 over 20 years. Every single year you do this, you're not just spending $12,000. You're giving up $48,000 of future purchasing power. And here's the trade-off no one says out loud. When your retirement account runs thin because you spent years subsidizing your kids, guess who they have to take care of? You. The most financially protective thing you can do for your children is make sure you don't become their financial burden later. That's not coldness. That's clarity. Cutting the financial umbilical cord is the hardest thing emotionally on this entire list. But the next one, item number 2, is almost pure logic, and yet people still look away from it. A couple I know retired 2 years ago. He worked in logistics. She was in healthcare admin. Between them, they had 2 cars, a sedan and an SUV. Made sense when both of them were commuting 5 days a week. But once they retired, the SUV basically stopped moving. Grocery runs, maybe. A long weekend trip twice a year. Otherwise, it just sat there in the driveway, then eventually pushed back into the garage to make room for other things. Last time I heard, a bird had built a nest under the hood. That SUV wasn't transportation anymore. It was a $3,500 a year storage decision they never consciously made. According to AA, the average cost to own and operate a new vehicle in the U.S. has crossed $12,000 a year when you factor in depreciation, insurance, fuel, and maintenance. That's for a car you're actually driving. But even a paid-off second vehicle that barely moves. Insurance, registration, periodic maintenance. Tires that age whether you drive on them or not. That's easily $3,000 to $4,000 a year walking out the door. Quietly, every year. Without asking. Now do the math the other direction. $4,000 a year is a week-long cruise for 2. It's 4 or 5 long weekends somewhere you've never been. It's a standing date night twice a month for the entire year. And money left over. You're not choosing between a car and nothing. You're choosing between a car that sits in your garage and the experiences you keep saying you'll get to someday. The same logic applies to timeshares, maybe even more so. Most people know timeshares are hard to exit. What they don't always see is the maintenance fee structure. Average annual fees now run $1,100 to $1,400, and they increase every year regardless of whether you use the property or not. If you haven't used yours in 2 years, that fee isn't a membership. It's a subscription to something you already canceled in practice, but forgot to cancel on paper. Sunk cost is a powerful thing. We hold on to things because we remember what they cost us, not because we're actually getting value from them today. The question isn't what you paid for it. The question is, if you didn't already own it, would you go buy it right now? If the answer is no, that's your answer. The next item on this list is harder to see because it doesn't show up on any balance sheet, but it might be the one doing the most damage. There was a surgeon, exceptional by every measure, 32 years in the OR, the kind of doctor other doctors called when things got complicated. When he retired, something shifted almost immediately. He wasn't the doctor, Michael, anymore. The person everyone deferred to, the one whose judgment ended arguments in a room. He was just Michael, a guy with a lot of free time and no particular place to be. His wife told me he started reorganizing the kitchen, then reorganizing it again, then offering detailed feedback on how she loaded the dishwasher. He wasn't difficult. He was lost. 40 years of his nervous system had been wired to solve problems, carry authority, be needed. And one day, on a Tuesday, basically, all of that stopped. I have to be honest about something here. A few years ago, I took an extended leave. Weeks in, I found myself opening my work email compulsively, refreshing an inbox I knew was empty, just to feel like something might need me. 20 times a day, maybe more. It wasn't about work. It was about what work had been standing in for. A sense that I mattered, that I was useful, that someone somewhere had a problem only I could help with. That feeling, when it disappears, is disorienting in a way that's genuinely hard to explain until you've sat in it. And this is the thing financial planning almost never accounts for. Your job title is what you do. It was never what you are. But your brain spent 4 decades treating those two things as the same. So when the title disappears, the brain reads it as a loss of self, not a loss of a role, a loss of identity. Research on retirement transitions consistently shows that the people who struggle most aren't the ones with the smallest portfolios. They're the ones who had the biggest jobs. The higher the status, the harder the landing. And here's the long-term cost if this doesn't get addressed. Retirement stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like a waiting room. You have the money, you have the time, but you spend it half present, half grieving something you can't name. Selling the title means doing the work before you retire, not after. Finding something that gives you the same things work gave you: a structure, contribution, a reason someone needs you in the room. It doesn't have to be paid. It doesn't have to be impressive. It just has to be real. Because the alternative is a very expensive spreadsheet and a very empty morning. If any of this is landing close to home, the identity piece, the feeling of not knowing who you are outside the job. Hit subscribe. Was Investor isn't just about the numbers. It's about the person who has to live with those numbers. And this next part is where the numbers get genuinely dangerous. There's a guy named Tom. Spent 35 years in manufacturing. Methodical, practical, not someone who wastes money. His one thing, the thing that kept him sane through all of it, was a 1969 Mustang Fastback he'd been slowly restoring in his garage for the better part of a decade. Every weekend, Saturday mornings, coffee on the workbench, radio on. That car was his project, his patience, his proof that something broken could be made whole again. When he retired, his financial planner ran the numbers. Storage, insurance, parts, tools, roughly $8,000 a year. The advice was straightforward: sell it, invest the proceeds, let it compound. So Tom sold the Mustang. 18 months later, his wife called someone they both knew. She was worried. Tom was spending 10, sometimes 12 hours a day on the couch, no project. No Saturday mornings. Nothing to fix, nothing to look forward to. The money was compounding fine. Tom wasn't. This is the mistake that conventional financial advice keeps making. It treats every asset the same way, as a line item to be optimized. But there are two fundamentally different kinds of assets in a retirement portfolio. There are financial assets, things that hold or grow monetary value. And there are purpose assets, things that hold your reason to get up. A spreadsheet cannot tell the difference. You have to. So before you sell anything, the RV, the boat, the classic car, the woodworking shop, run what I call the 90-day test. Don't use it for 90 days. Not because you have to sell it, just as a test. See what happens to your weekends. See what fills the space. If you don't miss it, you have your answer. If you're miserable by week 3, you have a different answer. Now, for the things that do pass the test, that you genuinely use and value, here's where the math gets interesting. Say you own an RV worth $100,000. Annual carrying costs, storage, insurance, maintenance, registration, roughly $10,000 a year. You use it 20 days a year. That's $500 per day of use, before you factor in fuel and repairs. Now compare that to renting a premium RV through a platform like Outdoorsy or RV Share for those same 20 days. High-end rental, full service, no storage headaches. Maybe $300 to $350 a day. You sell the asset. You take 30% of the proceeds and put them in a dedicated experience fund. You rent the nicest version of the thing you love, exactly when you want it, with none of the off-season burden. You kept the joy. You shed the liability. That's not deprivation. That's a cleaner version of the same life. The point is never to strip away the things that make retirement worth living. The point is to look honestly at whether you own the thing, or the thing owns you. Don't sell the reason you wake up in the morning. But the biggest asset most people own, their home. That's where the most dangerous advice is waiting. And that's exactly where we're going next. This is the one that gets people. Not because it's complicated, because it sounds so reasonable. You've raised the kids, they're gone. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a yard you're tired of maintaining. The logical move. The move every financial magazine, every well-meaning neighbor, every retirement checklist will tell you is to downsize. Sell the big house. Buy something smaller. Bank the difference. It's clean advice. It makes intuitive sense. And in a lot of cases, it quietly destroys equity that took 30 years to build. I remember sitting with a client, scrolling through listings on Zillow together. Their 4-bedroom was appraising around $200 per square foot. Solid number for their area. But the smaller single-story homes in the same zip code, the ones marketed as perfect for retirement, step-free, easy to maintain, were listing at $350 per square foot. They were going to pay a significant premium to buy a house with fewer stairs. That gap alone should give you pause. But it's not even the main problem. Here's what I call the 6% penalty. Even after the NAR settlement changed how buyers' agent commissions work, the total friction cost of selling a home hasn't gone away. Transfer taxes, title fees, closing costs on the new loan, staging, repairs to get the house market ready, moving costs. When you add it all up, selling a home routinely costs between 6% and 8% of the sale price. On a $600,000 house, that's $36,000 to $48,000. Gone. Before you've bought anything. Now run the full transaction. Sell the $600,000 house, take the hit, buy the $480,000 smaller home. On paper, you pocketed $120,000. But subtract the selling costs on the old house. Call it $40,000. Subtract closing costs on the new purchase. Another $10,000 to $12,000. Add in the repairs, the inspection flagged on the new place, maybe $15,000. Moving, storage, incidentals, another $5,000. You're looking at real net proceeds somewhere around $48,000 to $55,000. Not $120,000. Not even close. And that's before we talk about the mortgage rate trap. Millions of Gen X homeowners are sitting on mortgages locked in below 4%, some below 3%, from 2020 and 2021. If you sell and need to finance any portion of the new home, you're stepping into today's rate environment. Even on a smaller loan, your monthly payment could end up higher than what you're paying now on the larger house. You downsize the home. You upsize the payment. So what's the alternative? Stop thinking about selling the house. Start thinking about selling the unused functions of the house. The 4-bedroom family home you're rattling around in. That top floor you never go to. That formal dining room that hasn't been formally dined in since 2019. Those aren't reasons to sell. They're rooms waiting to be repurposed. Convert the main floor into your full living space. Close off what you don't use, reduce your heating and cooling footprint, and spend a fraction of what the transaction would have cost making the home work better for this chapter of life. The renovation is cheaper than the penalty, almost always. Now, the 6% penalty is a financial trap, but the last thing I want to leave you with isn't about a trap at all. We started this with a man and a fishing boat. He did the math right. He followed the advice. He optimized the spreadsheet and lost the thing that made 4:30 in the morning feel like something worth waking up for. That's the version of retirement nobody puts on the brochure. You have fewer than 1,000 healthy weeks after 60. Not a scare tactic, just a number. And like any finite number, it has a way of clarifying things. The 5 things we walked through today aren't really about selling stuff. They're about identifying what's carrying you versus what you're carrying. The financial support flowing to adult children who have time and options you no longer have. The second vehicle parked in the dark, costing you $3,500 a year to own nothing. The job title that became a substitute for identity instead of just a description of work. The expensive toy you've been told to liquidate without anyone asking whether it's the last thing keeping you curious. And the house you're being nudged to sell into a transaction that will quietly take 6% to 8% of everything you spent 3 decades building. Retirement isn't deprivation. It's not about stripping life down to the minimum so the numbers look clean. It's about clearing out the things that own you so you have room for the things you own. That's the whole trade. If you don't want to walk into retirement blind to the financial traps that are dressed up as conventional wisdom, make sure you're subscribed to Wes Investor. We'll keep working through this together. See you in the next one.